So I call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call.
Commissioner Jones,
Here.
Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Freeman, Commissioner Silvas,
Here.
Commissioner Diana.
Here.
Thank you.
And we have a quorum, thank you. So the first item of business is approval of the public hearing minutes. And we had a public hearing on the 28th of March, and those minutes were included in your packet. Is there a motion for approval of the public hearing meetings for March 28th?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Patty. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any discussion about the minutes from the public hearing from March 28th? Discussion? So all in favor of approval of those minutes, public hearing from March 28th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and the minutes from the public hearing on March 28th are approved. Second item are the minutes from our regular meeting, which occurred on March 28th also. You got the minutes from that meeting in your packet. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of March 28th?
I move to approve.
Patty, is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chris. Any discussion about those minutes from the March 28th regular meeting?
Just to say thank you again for wonderful minutes, Hillary.
Thank you, Holly. All in favor of approval of the minutes from March 28th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and the minutes from March 28th are approved. Are there any additions to our agenda this evening?
No.
Is there public input to the commissioners this evening?
No.
Okay. So that takes us to presentations and the staff report. And you have a copy of the staff report in your packet.
I just want to clarify, I apologize, I did neglect to include the physical copy of the staff report in your packet, so I apologize about that, but I'm happy to give just a brief verbal update. Our annual action plan for fiscal year 2023 was approved by City Council last night. We brought that to all of you back in March for approval, and again, that plan covers our community development block grant program and our home investment partnership program. So now that that's been approved by council, we will be working on getting it entered into HUD system and then submitted to HUD by the deadline in May. And then our program year for those funds will begin July 1st, 2023. And then the other update I have is regarding the Housing and Homeless Initiative grant program that we funded through the Home ARP allocation that we've received. It was $2.9 million in funding for affordable housing development and also homeless shelter and service programs. So back in the winter, we brought those agreements to all of you for approval. We did have a balance left over of those funds. We, didn't allocate all of them to eligible programs. So the committee that is made up of City of Urbana staff and City of Champaign staff will be meeting again next week to discuss that balance and to determine, what next steps to take to make sure we can get that money out into the community. And then any agreements or projects that result from that will come before all of you, like usual, for a discussion and a vote for approval. So we'll keep you updated on that. That's all I have. Anything else? Okay.
Did you mention, or did I miss it, what the residual was? That residual amount?
About $1 million was left over. And again, it's spread across a variety of different eligible categories. So supportive services for individuals who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. Again, development of non-congregate shelter, affordable housing development, things like that.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
And it's the first time I think we've done a competitive grant process where we didn't get a request for all the funds. So I don't know if because ARPA was out there and, the home ARP, I don't know, but that's okay. It gives people time to think, and we have 7 years to spend the money, so it's not like we're up against a deadline.
I was wondering what that deadline was. That gives you plenty of time to think. Any comments or questions about Braden's staff report? Is there any unfinished business to come before the commission this evening?
No.
So that takes us to new business. And the ordinance of authorizing the sale of certain real estate, that's the first item.
The city currently owns 3 properties, 903 North Division, 1107 North Gregory, and 1605 Wiley. 903 North Division and 1605 Wiley were acquired through our supportive housing program that used to be available as a competitive grant process. HUD has recently, well, probably in the last 10 years, changed that and combined the supportive housing program funding with Shelter Plus Care and Section 8 moderate rehab. So it's no longer a competitive grant we can apply for. We have been funding the program with our CDBG funding, but it counts against our public service cap, so it makes it a little tricky where we'd like to give more funding that direction. Also, it's very staff intensive because they have to have case management, and we've had a lot of damage in the properties where we've had to do some major rehabs. And so the Housing Authority approached us back in the fall. They had received a request from IDA to start a program for persons released from prison as a transitional housing program. And they asked if we would be interested in selling the single-family homes to them. We had met with council in 2x2 meetings, talked about the process, and we think it's a good move to sell the properties to them at this time. They have the capacity to continue on with the transitional housing program, which the community really needs. They're helping an underserved population, and their business is housing. So we've got some affordability requirements that will be placed on the properties till 2033, one of them. And so we know they have the capacity to make sure that happens. Otherwise, the city would have to pay back the funding, and we don't want that to happen. So at this time, staff is recommending that we transfer the properties to the Housing Authority. Looking to do that sometime in June. We're going to council in May, and then once we get their approval, we'll schedule closing if they approve it.
Sale as it is, with a recommendation for approval, or make some changes, or do not forward this to council for approval. So is there a motion for one of those options?
I move to go forward with option 1 to forward this to council with a recommendation for approval.
So we have a motion to forward the ordinance authorizing the sale to council with a recommendation for approval. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Just a question, was there any interaction with neighborhood groups about this?
No, we didn't, because the use isn't changing. You know, it's currently being used as a transitional housing units, and it'll continue to. So we just didn't feel the need. We were more concerned with making sure we got appraised value for the properties, because that was only fair to, funding that we get. But no, I didn't reach out for that reason, Chris. Sometimes when you bring attention to something like that, it brings negative connotations when the neighborhood's already lived with transitional housing, some of these units for 20 years.
Oh, yeah, I know, I've sold a bunch of properties for that purpose.
Right,
Just as a thought,
yeah,
it also brings negative
it certainly does.
conversation when it's found out afterwards, usually more negative conversation.
Is there other discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion on the table, which is to forward the ordinance authorizing the sale of the real estate with a recommendation for approval. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. So the ayes have it, and the motion carries. And then we can move on to the Youth Services Grant Program.
Thank you. So from February 2nd to March 31st, the city of Urbana solicited grant applications to our fiscal year 2023-2024 Youth Services Grant Program. And that program really targets local not-for-profit agencies that provide programs and services for low-income Urbana youth. And so in total, we committed $300,000 to that program. That money has come from 3 different pots. $75,000 from City General Fund, $200,000 from a State of Illinois DCEO grant, and then $25,000 of our Community Development Block Grant public service funding. So in your role on this commission, you are responsible for reviewing the commitment of that $25,000 in community development block grant funding and then making a recommendation to council. So staff is recommending that we commit $25,000 in our 2023-2024 community development block grant funding to Rape Advocacy Counseling and Education Services, or RACES, for their Survivor Services program. That program, with this funding, the agency will be able to devote a therapist to youth services and to serving youth, and 75% of that appointment would be specifically for Urbana youth. So in your packet, there's a more detailed program description. So that's what we're recommending for that $25,000 CDBG public service. The one thing I'll add is that that amount is contingent upon HUD approving our annual action plan, which typically doesn't happen until July, August. So, we'll need to wait for HUD to approve that before we can, execute an agreement. But we're requesting that you send that recommendation to council, again, for $25,000 in community development block grant funding for RACES, for their Survivor Services program. I will, just for the group, briefly walk through the other agencies that we're intending to fund. You're not voting on these. This is just, for information. We received applications from 13 agencies. And so the agencies that we will be funding, with the kind of the other pots of funding is Business Elevator, Dream Opportunity Center, Regional Planning Commission's Youth Assessment Center, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Illinois, Well Family Care Program, Champaign-Urbana Public Health District, Crisis Nursery, the Urbana Park District, RACES, as I mentioned, Steam Genius Hip Hop Express, the Refugee Center, Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center, and Sola Gracia Farm. And again, these agencies all submitted for programs that again target low-income Urbana youth. So the full list of agencies, and recommendations will be going to City Council in May. But again, tonight we're asking for your recommendation on that $25,000 in Community Development Block Grant Public Service funding to RACES.
Thank you, Braden. So is there a recommendation, or is there a motion to put forth one of the options?
Well, I have a question first, which is, I like the program, but it says here that one of the therapists would be devoted to youth services, and 75% of their appointments would be held for Urbana youth. What if they don't get enough youth to make appointments? Like, is it okay if they therefore serve other people in Urbana, not just youth? So, yeah, I guess I'm
sorry, I
asking
can't hear
about,
you.
the specificity of the program. So, this is intended to fund somebody who's going to spend 75% of their time with Urbana youth. But I think that assumes that there's going to be enough youth that get referred to this person or ask for appointments. So,
The executive director of RACES is here, and maybe she can help answer
hello.
that question.
I guess I'm just to me, it's sort of a compliance question of if we're funding this person to do 2 percentages of things, and what if they don't have enough clients to meet the 75%? That doesn't seem to be, that shouldn't be a problem, but would it be a problem from some auditing perspective that says?
So it sounds like there are maybe two questions of, do we think we'd have capacity to fill that caseload? And then is there an option for serving other clients if that's not the case? And I think the latter is more of a question for city staff. Based off of our service numbers prior to the pandemic, I don't think we'll have any problem filling the person's caseload. We saw decreased staffing during the peak of the pandemic and have been working on increasing that capacity. And recently hired someone who's very enthusiastic about taking on this role. And so we would be able to, as we're screening folks, because we do still have a waiting list right now, we're able to start that screening process where we're adding in, we've always asked about county because we have county-specific funding, but making it more specifically about city as well. And so that way we're just adding people to their caseloads that's specific to meeting that demographic. Like I said, I don't anticipate it being an issue, but of course it is variable, right? You know, who's ready to engage in therapy is going to depend over time. But the need is there, and what we have found is when we have the capacity, we see more people from Urbana than any other city. And so making sure that we have that capacity despite facing decreased federal funding right now is definitely, we're very excited about this opportunity to be able to serve folks here in Urbana.
I can also just kind of speak to the second part of your question. You know, we work very closely with, you know, our grantees, and, you know, there sometimes are instances where, you know, if maybe we need to kind of meet with them if maybe they're not going to meet that goal for the year, you know, agreements can be extended if necessary, you know, just to kind of help if there are kind of variable numbers. So we try to be, you know, throughout the process, kind of monitoring progress and making sure that, you know, kind of the goals in the agreement are being met. And then if not, what can we do to kind of address that? But that doesn't happen often, thankfully, because just there is a big need in the community that we see.
Having a wait list itself is
Yes.
big evidence.
Just following up on that same thought there, it does look to me, I mean, basically, the percentage, the percentage of load is really based upon appointments, not number of people or even number of people who are initially seen, correct? So is it usual that the youth appointment schedules are maybe longer or
It's
more
very
numerous?
variable. So we take a survivor-centered and survivor-driven approach. So we're not capping people at a set number of sessions because healing looks really different for everyone. And youth is a very wide range, right? We start seeing clients as young as 3. And so getting a 3-year-old to a point where they're able to engage in therapy in a way that's productive for them is going to look really different than a 21-year-old. Other factors that contribute to length of therapy engagement are things like, were there multiple incidents? How long has it been since something happened? You know, are there siblings involved? Are there parents who are needing access to our caregiver support group? So there are a lot of different factors, and it's difficult to say, oh, you know, this age group tends to need this much time and this age group needs this much time, because it really is so incredibly individualized.
Mm-hmm. But your goal is to have, or your commitment is to have 75% of your time reserved for
Correct.
youth and youth-related.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to meet option 1 as presented here, to forward this funding allocation to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Motion, is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Not, we'll call the question. All in favor of forwarding the proposed funding allocations for races with a recommendation for approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it and the motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there anything else to come before the commission this evening? No, then we are adjourned.